And I'm very pleased to introduce you to our speaker this evening. Dianne Sonnenberg is an internationally known mosaic artist, and she specializes in fine art, mosaics, and sculpture. She is the president of the Austin Mosaic Guild, and I'm going to have her talk about her mosaic journey and introduce herself to you. So I'm going to hand the program over to you, Dianne.
Thanks so much, Amy. And thanks for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. And this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I've been doing commissions for nearly 20 years. Can you see my screen there?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I've had a lot of experience with this subject, and I'll tell you a little bit more about myself and my work as we go through the process. I'm going to hide my face there. Amy asked me to talk about commissions. So our title for today's presentation is Demystifying Commissions. Should you fear or embrace them? And it's a very broad and complex topic, so I think that we'll have the opportunity to learn just an introductory bit in this next hour. So I'm going to talk for about 30 or 40 minutes and then give you time for questions and answers. So from large to small, I want to discuss commissioned art and how it works. On this page, you'll see a piece that I'm very well known for, oceanography on the left. It's a large egg commission that I created in 2009, and many of you might have recognized it from back then if you were making mosaic art and following in some of the groups and at SAMO. That small sun mandala in the upper right corner, that was my very first commission. A friend of mine asked me to make something for her. And that's what we came up with. And then down in the lower right corner is a example of a commission I created. It's a built-in seat for a cob house. It's built right into the wall, and it was created on site with the homeowner's involvement. So we're going to talk first about types of commissions. The first one is probably the kind of thing you will hear most of all when you are letting people know that you create mosaics. People see your work. What you hear is, "You're so talented. Will you make a mosaic flower pot, a mandala, a backsplash?" And these are the kinds of things we mostly hear. And this is generally how most of us get involved in creating commissions. Unfortunately, these situations can be some of the trickiest to navigate, because it's wonderful that they value your work, they want something you've created for themselves, but it's very unlikely that you'll be compensated for that more often than not. And it's a very difficult thing to know how to navigate. It doesn't always have to be that way, but quite often it is. So, many times you'll want to make mosaics gifts for the people you love around you, but other times it might be nice if they offered to compensate you in some way. So we're going to, throughout this presentation, talk a bit more about that and come up with strategies, ways for that to happen. and at the end have a discussion, and people can share actually how they've had that work for them. Another common type of commission that you'll receive is commissions by individuals. A mosaic that's destined for someone's home, maybe their personal office space, but it's somebody who's contacted you saying they want you to make something for them. This is more easy to navigate than some of the other commissions because you're dealing with one person or a couple or a family. And I'm going to offer plenty of advice during this presentation about how to approach these and how to succeed with them. I just want to mention during this talk, we'll be talking about freestanding mosaics and mosaic installations, maybe interchangeably, but most of what I'm saying affects both. The installations are trickier, like this mosaic ceiling, for instance, but much of the discussion will apply to just about everything. And this is in the Ozark Mountains in Missouri. Commercial commissions, businesses, hospitals, schools, public buildings. There's a wide range of situations in this category, but most of them do involve multiple decision makers, maybe an architect or a agent or a committee to make decisions, and that can be a little trickier to navigate. It's a more complex situation. And I think generally a commission like this requires a little more confidence, a little more experience, and some multiple abilities on your part in order to make it succeed. I would suggest perhaps that you take on smaller individual projects before tackling something like this one, which is in a hospital. And this piece was commissioned by a art agent on behalf of the hospital. It was a very complicated process. It involved architects, art consultants, interior designers, the hospital art coordinator, and many subcontractors as well to make it happen. Additionally, a lot of hired helpers because the timeline that they gave me was impossibly short. So these types of projects are difficult, complex, and they also require you to be a project manager. And just for fun, here are a few little close-ups of that project. I worked with some fused glass artists to create some amazing elements for this piece, and also multiple artists participated in creating the fish and the corals and various other elements. It turned into a community project. And speaking of community projects, this is another category that you might find yourself in a situation to create. They're the most rewarding and quite often the most work. Their group endeavors with you as the lead artist or the organizer. This piece shown in the image, I collaborated with Susan Ribnick, who's on this call, and this is at the Dell Children's Medical Center in Austin, Texas, and we worked with the Austin Mosaic Guild to together probably about 70 artists to create this installation in the healing garden at that hospital. Community projects, you're quite often the designer, the fabricator, the instructor, the project manager, the facilitator, the organizer, the coach, and a bucket cleaner. It's a lot of work. It's also quite often the kind of project where you are paid the least. These are the kinds of things where people say, will you do this for our organization, our group, our hospital, our school? And you don't typically get paid for them. If the project's near and dear to your heart, perhaps you will choose to donate your time and talents. If not, we're going to talk in a little while about ways to seek out funding so that you can actually be valued for your time and get compensation. And public art, which is probably the most complex and involved commissions you can take on. They usually involve a municipality or a major organization, and typically they're publicly funded. Public art will almost always involve an RFQ or an RFP. What that stands for is a request for qualifications or a request for proposals. The difference is a request for qualifications is asking you to submit your portfolio, your body of work. You're not actually creating a specific design. The entity is hiring you for who you are and the work that you do. And then together you come up with a design. A request for proposals is a little more upfront work on your part. They're asking you to provide them with a concept, a design, a product that they will choose amongst. So typically you're creating a request for proposals for no money. You're not getting paid for that. And then if you're lucky enough to get selected, then you're chosen. So a request for qualifications is a better way to go. It's a very precise application process, and usually the artist is chosen through a jurying process. And with a public art process, a public art piece, you can really expect the process to take a lot of time. What you're seeing on your screen here is a public art installation that I completed just a few days ago. It just went in. You can see there's going to be some landscaping down below, but it's not in yet. And this project for the city of Austin took over 2 years. And I was super happy to have it done because it was a lot of work, especially the last 2 weeks getting it in. The next category I want to talk about is donations or giveaways. As artists, we're often asked to donate our work to a good cause, an auction or a fundraiser, maybe for schools, religious groups, community groups, theaters, etc., etc. And they offer exposure as what they're giving in return. Honestly, this rarely happens. I've rarely seen that happen. There's a lovely little song on Instagram. Some of you may have heard it. It's called It Costs That Much. And they reinforce the fact that exposure doesn't pay the bills. So give your work to organizations that you care about. Give it as a donation because you want to. It's a lovely way to make a large donation to a group that you care about. Your art can raise more money than you might have been able to donate on your own. So that's wonderful. But as far as it furthering your career, typically that does not happen unless it's a high profile donation like this Guitar Town project that you're seeing in the picture. Was sponsored by Gibson Guitars. They put a lot of publicity and events into it. They had celebrity sponsors. You can see here the Chicks were my celebrity sponsors, and it was a big deal. It got lots of publicity, and it did actually get me other work. I became known as a large-scale artist based on this guitar, and that really set my career in motion. So it can be a good thing, but just be very careful about what you're donating to. Do your homework. And there are lots of good high-profile opportunities, like with the Cow Parade and the Hearts in San Francisco, things like that. So we're going to talk now about finding clients. You know, if you decide you want to sell your work and create work for other people, where do you find them? I've found for myself, the best way when I was starting out was word of mouth. Talking to people, other people who knew what I did, recommended me to clients they knew, meeting people at art fairs or events or exhibits, you know, letting people know that this is what you do and you're looking for opportunities to create work for other people. Social media and websites are probably your best way to promote yourself. If you can get a good quality website, you'll find that people do seek you out through Google searches. Looking for a mosaic artist in Austin, Texas will bring my website up, and people reach out through that. Social media is free. It's, you know, a wide scope. So that's also a really good way to do it. If you look on Instagram or Facebook, you'll find other artists who are promoting themselves and their work really, really well. And it does work. Local and regional art groups and organizations like NEMS, like the Austin Mosaic Guild, like other arts organizations in your area. Join them, and they will quite often have opportunities that come into them for people looking for an artist to create a large or small commission. And this is another way that I've gotten a lot of commissions over the years. Join as many as you can. Online calls for art, callforentry.org. Cafe is probably one of the best known, and that has a wide variety of opportunities from small to large. Publicartist.org or anyartist.org, those are the ones that are going to have more public, large scale, high profile calls. But join them. You know, sign on, fill out the form, upload a few photos, and then you get the emails whenever they have calls coming through, and you'll get to see what's out there and what's available. So I highly recommend that. Architects and interior designers are great resources because they're working directly with many clients who might want mosaics for their homes or businesses. If you know a particular architect or designer, that's probably the best way to reach out to them. I haven't had any real experience with cold calling, reaching out on my own, and I'm not sure that would be all that fruitful. But if there was maybe an interior design group in your area or something like that, that might be a way to reach out, give a talk to their organization about what you do. If you have a website or a social media presence, you'll find that some of them may find you and reach out when they have a particular client looking for a mosaic element in their home. And art agents and consultants, I've listed a couple here that I've had contact with. This is tricky. I've only had them reach out to me through my website, but I suppose it is possible to research and reach out to them to let them know what you're doing and such, but I just haven't done it. You would need to have a nice, strong portfolio and present yourself as a competent, fully capable artist. These companies are typically working with hospitals, municipal buildings, skyscrapers, things like that, hotels. So it's a whole different marketplace. And after we're done with my presentation, I'd love to hear from you if you've got additional ideas or know of good resources for finding clients, things that have worked for you, because we all benefit from hearing from each other regarding what works and the successes that you've had. So we're going to talk about design and presentation now. This is, in my opinion, the hardest part, the most important part, and also the part of the process that people want right away. So let's break it down. So initially, what I would start out with a client is a brief sketch. It's easy to do, and it's a good first step in the process. I want to engage my client in the process because it's not something that happens immediately. If they ask you to just create something for them, you need to know what they want. Ask them to talk about what their vision is. Quite often they'll say, I don't know. So then it's your job to engage them. Well, what colors were you thinking of? Or what style do you already have in your home? Can I come visit and see the environment where you want this mosaic to be? Or, what kinds of feelings are you trying to evoke? With a few well thought out questions, you'll get them to start talking, and it turns out that they do know what they want. They just need some help to get from point A to B. And at that point, you can provide them with a narrative, give them sort of a few sentences about what you think they might want and a brief sketch. But this part of the process takes time, and it's hard, and it's involved, and it's not easy. So doing just a brief sketch before committing is helpful. They may say, oh, no, that's not at all what I want. I want it to be traditional and formal. And then you back up and start again. This piece, I designed it backwards, and it turned out that, or I designed it with the purple floral leaf things on the other side, and it turned out, with the way the table was facing and the way the sun was shining, it was better to have it reversed. So we did that, and that made it work more easily for them. But it's a process, and if you approach it like that, it's going to be a lot less stressful. I want to caution you to avoid people who tell you, I'll know it when I see it. So basically what they're asking you to do is keep designing things until they see something that they like. And that's just not worth your time or theirs, frankly. In my opinion, in my experience, those clients turn out to be not very easy to work with. So just save yourself the headaches and don't engage them. If it turns out that they change their mind and they do know what they want, then go for it. I've found that my initial gut reactions to a client are almost always correct. So the ones that I was a little iffy about were the ones that were difficult clients in the end. So come up with an excuse and move on. It's not worth it, in my opinion. So once I've done that part, I use design software to flesh out my idea. I've found that Procreate on my iPad is wonderful. It's easy enough that I can use it, and it's got a lot of options that I find are useful in terms of putting the mosaic in the place where it's going. So this is a outdoor table that I created for my absolutely wonderful and adorable 95-year-old client who is a former student. And we could take my drawing, place it on the table in the photograph that she sent me, and see how it would look. And here's a couple other pictures showing it, how it ended up looking. And that was a really useful process for both of us. It allows them to see what the mosaic's going to look like, and it facilitates the process. Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator are other kinds of software you can use. Other people may have access to others that they've used and they're comfortable with, but they're good tools. Sample boards and maquettes. I always do a small sample board with the materials and the ornamenta that I plan to use in the mosaic. It gives the customer a chance to see what it's actually going to look like. Because as we know, the sketches and images can't really convey the beauty and nuance of a mosaic. And for sculptural works, it's imperative you have to do maquettes. Maquettes are small samples of the actual sculptures. It helps to determine size and scale. It also helps you clarify your design in 3 dimensions. I just want to show you how I used my maquettes for the community seed pods that I just finished up. I used them in my presentation board. I took those maquettes and I plugged them into a photograph of the site. I added my xeriscape flowers, and it became a page that I could show to the city with very detailed visuals of how these 5 giant seed pods on poles were going to look in reality. The other way to approach design is to hire somebody else, an artist or a designer. And this can be really useful for certain projects, especially if they're beyond the scope of your own design abilities. I hired Beatrice Baldwin. She's a watercolor artist, to assist me with the fish mural for the hospital, because I knew that I couldn't get that kind of detail on my own with my own drawing skills, which are very limited. But she could. So we talked, this was Amy, this was when I broke my ankle and my wrist. So I was hugely incapacitated, but fortunately I didn't hit my head, so I could still talk. And I sat down with Beatrice and we just hashed it out. I told her what I was looking for, the vision I had, and she helped me put it all together. It also gives you, by hiring somebody, and it could be just a sketch artist, it gives you a clear and professional presentation to provide to your client. Sometimes you need architectural or CAD drawings. For the seed pods, my daughter went to architectural school, so I hired her to create these CAD drawings for the seed pods that showed the exact precise dimensions, how tall they were going to be, how, all the detail work. And for something large or complicated, that is an essential part of the process. And there are people out there to do that. I think Sherry Warner Hunter hired somebody from the local university who could help her with things like that when she needed them, for instance. So we're going to jump over to talk about agreements and contracts. When you offer to do something, do a mosaic for a client, you want to have it be very clearly spelled out. So what I'm going to do is walk through the agreement I created for this tabletop project for an individual who found me through my website. And you want to remember, this process is scary for the clients too. They may not have ever reached out to an artist, but they have this idea for something they want, and they don't understand how it works either. So by going through and creating a contract or an agreement, you're helping them as well. And Amy, I'd sent Amy a copy of this sample agreement, and she's put it in the chat. She'll put it in the chat again so you can download it and use it as, oh, awesome, thank you. And then you can use this as a jumping off point for creating your own. And we're just going to go through it quickly, page by page. And how are we doing on time? We're almost at the point where we need to do questions. So the cover page is your contact information, their contact information. Basically, what you're doing is putting all of the details into one document. And for most projects, this is sufficient. It is true that some larger entities would have their own contracts, but for most of the things that you would do to start out with, this works. And the final page is a signature page, so that makes it legally binding for both of you. So on the first page, I will generally give the description. I'll say a little bit about who I am. This is where your design sketches, photos, inspiration goes, and then you outline the process. And I find that outlining the process is very important, so the client knows what you're doing and how it works. It's not just gluing some mosaic tesserae onto a substrate. There's a lot more to it than that. And spell out all the details. I think transparency and clarity is very important, so you both know exactly what's happening and what to expect, what's being used, how it works. I described the materials, what they are and why I chose them, and then the fabrication process. On this page, I describe how the installation will take place, whether I'm going to be doing it or I'm going to hire somebody else to do it, clarify the details. You'll notice there's a section there, the artist will provide certain things, the homeowner will provide certain things, like access to a water source, having a staging area where you can get messy and mix grout and things like that that you might not think about ahead of time, but you need to have that kind of a space available to work in and such, and having the substrate, the surface, be completely prepared and ready for the mosaic installation per your specifications. That doesn't always happen. They don't always understand. So having that spelled out is important. And then you have a cost outline where you spell out what's being charged. I typically do not break down the pricing like I did here, but this particular client wanted the materials priced out separately from the labor, so that's how I did it. But typically I will just give a cost for the mosaic. I'll figure it all in my head ahead of time and on paper, but then we'll just give a single price. And that typically works out well. And we're going to talk about price in just a minute. And then price the installation separately because it is a separate thing, and the expected schedule. You'll notice under labor, I also wrote in there the estimated hours needed to complete the project. I think it's useful for them to see that I might be spending over 100 hours on something that I'm charging a lot of money for. And that's why they can do the math and figure out how that is. And then make sure that you note that any changes or issues are communicated promptly. If they make changes, you may have additional charges. And the terms are all spelled out. You can read that in the attachment that you get. And make sure you both sign it. Make sure you both get copies of the signed copy. And for smaller family projects, it might not be appropriate or seem necessary, but it really does help you to clarify the project by having an agreement or a contract. If you were to say, make something for Aunt Mary and somebody else wanted something similar to that, if you have it all sort of spelled out, then you can know how to charge the other person what it's worth, whereas maybe you gave Aunt Mary a special deal or did it out of the love you have for your aunt. Many, like I said, many entities have their own contracts. Take the time to read and understand them. You are in a position to negotiate. You can ask for changes to be made. And this is all very useful for both you and them. It takes the guesswork out of the process. It helps you both be very clear and transparent. And I think it's essential. And the basic agreement, if you have a basic outline for an agreement, then you can fine tune it, revise it, and you reuse it for additional projects. Pricing. So the big question is how much to charge. And I don't have a specific easy answer. My quick answer is it depends on who and what it's for. So Aunt Mary is going to get a very different price than the Bank of Nova Scotia. And that's just how it works. But in a moment, I think we'll take a look at that. We'll take a look at specifics about how to price your things. One thing to know is you can count on your project to take longer and be more expensive than you think. There are lots of pricing guidelines and resources out there available to you on online, in books, other artists. So seek those out, use them. Commercial and public projects usually have a predetermined budget to work within, and that's actually somewhat easier. You know what to expect, you know how much they're going to pay you, so you can work within that to develop a work of art that you'd be happy getting paid that amount of money for. So that's actually relatively easy as these things go. And I'm just going to talk briefly about alternative funding, like for the community projects. There are grants, crowdsourcing, donations, fundraisers that you can do. And there's also a lot of information out there about that. You can use Google, and there are books written, with crowdsourcing. It's actually pretty easy to create a GoFundMe and put it out to the community that wants the project and get some pretty decent funding to pay you, buy the materials, pay your helpers, and that can be a lot more satisfying than just having to spend a whole lot of money for a project for your neighborhood. So when you're pricing individual commercial things, sorry, I couldn't read the word because there was a thing in front of it. Which is typically what you'll be figuring out pricing for on your own. First of all, ask your client if they have a budget. There's nothing wrong with asking. They may not answer, but it doesn't hurt to ask. If they want you to tell them how much it costs, then what you do, you figure out your costs, all your materials, your supplies, your overhead, all of that, and then estimate your labor per square foot. This is how I do it. So say I'm doing a 20 square foot piece, $400 a square foot. You can do the math and figure out, wait, 400 a square foot. No, let me back up. My labor is maybe 50 or 75 a square foot, and then figure out how much that works out to. Then triple your labor estimate because it's going to take longer than you think. And you're also not just including the time it takes to make the mosaic, but also all the other stuff. And then consider doubling that seriously, because it's going to take you longer than you think. And look at the total. Does it seem about right? If it doesn't, you can then adjust it to a number that you feel good about. And that little sequence of events is pretty much how I do it. So it's a bit intuition, a bit math, and a bit just figuring it out. There's not a good solid science to it. And then I love this meme. When your client asks if you can do it cheaper, educate the client on why mosaics can be costly and are costly. And then, okay, you quote $10,000, they tell you they want to pay $5,000. Have the conversation where you adjust the project, the size, the materials, the design, whatever it takes to meet their budget, but do not do a $10,000 mosaic for $5,000. You're not serving yourself or your client. Adjust it to meet their price instead. So on my website, you can go to diannesonnenberg.com, and I have a page that outlines commissions and custom work. So I give a little couple paragraphs about that. And I also go to the trouble of doing a little bit of educating the client on that page and tell them what's involved in the process. I have included a range of costs here. Not everybody does that, but I'll explain to you why I do, because it gives them an opportunity to have that question of how much is this going to cost me answered. It gives them a starting point to consider, and if this is way out of what they thought it would cost, then they just go away and don't try to get you to do it for cheaper. I also mentioned that there's a design fee, and that's something that you can adjust up or down. And I mentioned that it can be negotiated as needed, but so that you're not taking your time and effort to create a design and then they walk away and say, sorry. I've had that happen. And I've also had people take my design and give it to somebody else to make cheaper. So suck it up and ask for some money right away. It's worth it. And in the times that I haven't done that, I've regretted it. And you can read through the other things. It's just basically educating your clients so they know what's involved. It's not a quick and easy process. And it is expensive. So once you've got the commission, planning and organization is an important part of the process. Fabrication is what we do best. It's what brings us joy making these mosaics, but we do have a lot more involved when we do a commission, and these additional elements are important. The design and initial planning, which we've talked about, meetings, presentations, site visits, those all take time. Sourcing your materials and supplies takes time. Creating a timeline for yourself if they've got a deadline or not, just having an idea of how long this is going to take. Keeping track of your time and your expenses. I love spreadsheets, so I will create a lot of spreadsheets for each project, which outlines things. I can keep things in columns, and I like the organization of that. If you don't like spreadsheets, which some of you I know do not, just come up with a system that works for you. A folder on your table where you can jot down notes and make lists and such, whatever works. And troubleshooting and problem solving. If you include this in the process and understand that problems will come up, things won't go as planned, then you won't be surprised when that happens. It's just part of it. It'll always, something won't go as planned. And then above all, communication and transparency. It helps you both, and it makes for a more successful project. So that's the gist of my talk. I want to mention I am the organizer of the Mosaic Marathon at SAMA this year. It's in Buffalo, New York, so that's sort of not too far from your backyards. If any of you are going, I am going to be putting together a triptych mural for a building that houses 10 nonprofit organizations. It's in the neighborhood that endured that horrific mass shooting last year in Buffalo. So it's a neighborhood that needs some love. So we have the opportunity to experience an immensely rewarding community project. And if you're interested in gaining some hands-on experience, if you're going to be at the conference, I would love it if you would sign on as a planning or an organizing volunteer. So if that speaks to you, send me an email. And there's my address. We can put that in the chat as well. The takeaways. Is it easy? Definitely not. Doing a commission involves a lot of extra work beyond what you would do creating a mosaic on your own. But is it worth it? Absolutely. You're creating lasting legacy mosaics for others to enjoy, and you'll earn money while doing what you love. I encourage you to learn from your fellow artists. We're all happy to share our experience and expertise. You can Google different groups online, and NEMS and Austin Mosaic Guild, we all are happy to help our fellow artists. I suggest starting small, gain experience, and then be confident and brave. So miigwech, this is thank you in my native language, Anishinaabemowin. Thank you.
That was such a wonderful overview. Thank you. We have a few questions, and I see we have a few minutes left. So let's do our best, and then we can open the conversation if there's time. So very first,
Great, and I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy to stick around longer if other people are.
Oh, thank you. Very early on, someone was just asking where that egg mosaic is located.
They're on a ranch outside of Austin, Texas, on private property. The owners have a lot of commissioned artwork. It's what they love to do. So they were a perfect early client because it was something they enjoyed. They loved the engaging with artists.
That is great. Jean was asking at what point you can ask if they have a budget. I feel like you touched on this, but is there a particular moment in your conversations with a potential client when you would ask that?
Within the first couple conversations, I would say somebody calls you, asks for a backsplash. You talk about, what kind of a design they want. Do they have a budget? It's perfectly okay to bring that up early on.
Great, thanks.
It's hard. I know it's hard to talk about money, but
no, I second that.
Yeah, they'll either answer or they won't.
So Andrea noticed that in one of the examples that you showed, you actually broke down the design into individual tessera. Do you need to show how those will be cut in the black and white sketch, or can you just show the outline and colors?
Yeah, good question. I generally will just show the outline and colors and not do the individual tessera. And as you might have noticed in that one, what I drew wasn't actually how it ended up looking. It was finer than the sketch. So just a basic design is fine. And that's usually what I would recommend and what I do.
Thanks. So there's actually only one other question right now in the chat, which is, do you ever do a price with a contingency fee, like a 10% plus or minus, depending on changes? And also, do you include a kill fee?
I do tend to include a contingency fee in what I ask for. So say if I determine a mosaic might be worth $8,000, I might ask for 10, knowing that there will probably be problems, more expensive materials, more time spent, etc.
So you build that into your
yeah.
initial price rather than saying to the client, this might increase or decrease.
Exactly. I build, I would just say $10,000. And if they want that broken down, then I can do that and say, okay, this much for materials, this much for contingency, etc. So it's part of the transparency if they want it, but most people don't ask.
And actually, Lori's wondering, what are your maquettes made from?
Typically they're made from clay, but I've discovered through having a lot of trouble with clay and some designs that Paltaya is fantastic. I create the shape out of aluminum foil and then use the Paltaya fiberglass concrete mix over the top of that. And if you go to paltaya.com, PALTIYA.com, they have a lot of videos and information about how it works. It's just really easy to just crumble up aluminum foil and make your shapes and then cover them with the Paltaya mix. And lightweight, easy to do, and I've found that that's great. I've recently also heard about paper clay, and I'd like to give that a try as well, because you want it to be easy.
Right. I've watched
for me, clay isn't easy.
Yeah. So since Dianne is willing to stay on for a few more minutes, I'd like to open the floor, and if any of you would like to comment or ask questions out loud, please feel free.
While we're waiting for questions, do you want to talk, Emily, about the upcoming project with the Charles River Museum?
I would love to give a plug for that, but I think let's stay on topic for right now, and then I'll do that in a minute or two. Do any of you have other questions for Dianne or any comments about the presentation? There are some really happy comments in the chat box that it was a great presentation, really helpful, very informative. So, and everyone loves your work.
Thank you.
I second all of that. Yeah,
It's a lot to cover in a short amount of time, isn't it?
Really is, but you know,
a lot of things we didn't get to talk about.
Definitely, but also for some of us, I mean, I know for myself, I've done a number of those types of commissions, and it's such a good sanity check to hear you say that some of them are incredibly complex and some of them can be easier and some of them are tricky in terms of the interpersonal dynamics, and it just really helps to have you lay it out in that organized way. And I know there are people who have done and haven't done commissions in the past, so I really appreciated it.
Thanks, Emily.
Really, no comments?
I'm in Austin as well, and Dianne,
Hey, Mindy.
so appreciate you sharing your experience. I've only done commissions in a more private sector, but I so appreciate you normalizing some of the the roadblocks and also the charging, the pricing. And I think that's really hard for a lot of creatives. You know, it's like to know that, yeah, it's going to take more than we ever think it's going to take, and it's okay, and pay yourself. And yeah, it's a complex situation. And I've never done the large scale public that you have, but yeah, I appreciate seeing the marquettes and just kind of those stages. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome. And I just want to also say, Mindy, that it's absolutely terrifying to ask somebody for $40,000 for like a big project. You know, it's terrifying.
Well, I've already, when I've done some of the private ones, I know it's been brought up about asking for budget, and I didn't used to, and now I do, like the first conversation, because, and I tell people I can get complex and not as simple, or we can go simple, because I've kind of gotten a little screwed along the way, and I've done it to myself because I don't have those conversations, and I tend to get kind of complex about my work. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So I like to, it really helps me get that solidity at the beginning, or at least a ballpark of what we're doing. So yeah.
Absolutely. And we all know that we give more than we get typically anyway, because we just do. We want it to be awesome.
Yeah.
So
go ahead, Lori.
are we on mute? Oh no. Thank you, Emily, Amy, and Dianne. But I'm going to be in Buffalo, and I would love to help out somehow on the marathon. So I will write you a note.
Oh, great. Thank you, Lori.
Is that good? Okay. Thanks. That's it. That's my question. Thank you.
Lori is a great pair of hands to have, so you will definitely benefit from that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I think perhaps we should end the conversation here with Dianne. This was really wonderful. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
I would like to just do a plug for that upcoming community project if you all have one more minute. Yes? Okay, so you've probably heard us mention that we've been asked to do a 3-panel mosaic for the Charles River Museum of Industry and Innovation in Waltham, and at Waltham, Massachusetts. And that is right around the corner. We are narrowing in on a design and have scheduled 3 sessions that you haven't seen the dates for all of you and the public to participate. And we're also about to ask who would like to make a piece on their of the design on their own at home. So when you see that email, please think about whether you have the time to make an element of the mosaic. If you do, we'll send you everything you need except the tessera. You'll get an outline of the element that you're making, full size, and an explanation, and you'll use your own frost-proof materials to make it. So I hope that many of you choose to participate. We'll be specific in the email about the dates, but it's basically the summer. You would have the whole summer to make it. And then we will be putting together all of the pieces and working collectively on background elements in the fall, early fall. And we want to get it installed before it gets really cold and freezes. So it should be fun. I'm actually going at the recommendation of the museum folks, I'm going out to the Brimfield Antiques Market this Thursday to look for Waltham watches to incorporate into one of the panels. So if any of you want a field trip with me, let me know.
Actually have the first email went out over the weekend, and we have at least 11 people who have signed on so far.
You guys are great.
Yeah. And we also have another project, the collaborative project. Some of you may have signed up from that as well. And we're going to go, we have a webinar on Thursday to go through the call for art and answer any questions you might have about that project. There's a lot of them stuff going on. We also have Gary Drossel speaking about making mosaic floors. That's on May 25th. And Linda Biggers is going to talk about how to use epoxy sculpt and paste in mosaics on June 7th. So there's something there for everybody.
Amy,
Yeah, go
how
ahead, Laura.
approximately what size are the elements for the Waltham project, like for the individual people to do?
I haven't drawn the full scale cartoons yet, but I'm imagining that no one's element would be any bigger than a square foot.
Okay,
Is
thank
that,
you.
is that
Yeah,
specific?
that helps. Yeah,
now?
yeah.
Roberta?
Yeah, I was wondering, Emily, it would be really interesting to know the process that you've gone through with this Waltham project in regard to everything that Dianne has talked about tonight. You know, the design process, the blah, 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 you know, like that would be really interesting to hear.
Bye, Mindy. Thanks for
Someday.
joining. Roberta, I would love to share that. I feel like, you know, it's while we're in the thick of it, it's always a little bit, we're still not settled on design, and all the materials, and all of the details. But yeah, I'm more than happy to either do an informal webinar for anyone who's curious, or to just share it a little bit more formally once we're all the way through. Just to put it in Dianne's categories, you know, this is one of those projects that we're doing for an organization that we care about, mostly as a donation. We have a small grant that covers, well, we have a $1,500 grant, which means that'll mostly go to materials and the very little bit of, you know, a little bit of the time that goes into it and mailing things to people. So it's not, you know, it's not the kind of public art installation where there was a call for art. This was just worked out with the museum.
Yeah, a lot of projects are just for the love of the project.
Yeah. And a lot of hours of time go into this from all of you who participate, but also from all of us who are planning and designing and negotiating. Amy and Jamie and I and Cecilia have really been working hard on this. So I'm gonna put my little one to sleep. But it was really nice to see all of you. And Dianne, thank you again. This was really lovely and super
helpful.
Great. Thank you,
You're
Diane.
welcome.
Okay, goodbye,
Emily.
everybody. Thank you for joining.
Bye.